Hello and welcome to Thursday's edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm a football and recruiting analyst for Osceola, and I'm joined today by Kevin Stone from EagleAction.com, the Rivals Boston College site. And Kevin, we're excited to have you on, man.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I know that you're a busy man. You cover both the Patriots and Boston College, as well as a variety of recruiting responsibility up there in the New England corridor. And I think you said you have about 15 other colleges that you cover between division, I guess all divisions, FCS, FBS. So we appreciate you taking time. Kevin's been covering Boston College for 6 years, so we feel like we got a really good opportunity to learn more about Boston College as they get ready to open their season against Florida State on Monday night, Labor Day night, and FSU tries to improve its record to 1-1 after Georgia Tech. Kevin, first of all, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah. All right, so a lot of things going on in Boston College this year. You get Thomas Castellanos back, but I think the real story surrounding the program is Bill O'Brien is taking over for Jeff Hafley. You were there for all of Hafley's run. So my first question to you would be, what are the biggest differences in the program under O'Brien than Hafley? And I'll let you start with that.
So it's funny. We were just talking off air. For the last 4 years, we did not see practice. We had 20 minutes of stretching and that was about it. So there was a lot of guessing sort of behind the scenes with Jeff Hafley. Now, Bill O'Brien has opened up every single practice, every single scrimmage, everything. So it's been nice. It's been a welcome addition. Look, it's ran like an NFL training camp. It's felt just like the Patriots do. And obviously Bill was there last year as the offensive coordinator. There's 80 years combined experience, NFL experience on this staff. And you can absolutely tell as soon as you walk in to the building every single day, just from, the way practice is structured to the emphasis on details is sort of, it stands out a ton, especially early on in practice. So, excuse me, there's a new standard. Mediocrity has sort of been BC's MO for 15 years now. They haven't won 8 games in a season since 2009. So that is now changing. The bar has been raised before a game has even been played, but I think they need it. There needs to be higher expectations for this program.
Yeah, and you mentioned his staff, and I know a couple of guys personally on his staff. His defensive coordinator is Tim Lewis, a longtime NFL assistant who I actually worked with. He was the head coach of the Birmingham Iron in the 1 year of the Alliance of American Football spring football season in 2019. Actually had his team got stuck in San Diego. I was in charge of the league operations, so I was actually staying at the hotel with Tim and his team, and they had to stay an extra night, and I had to convince the hotel to let them back in their rooms and get meals served. So I have a great memory of Tim and I sitting back out on the by the pool in San Diego talking about the craziness that was that night as they tried to get their plane fixed to go home the next morning. And then you got Will Lawing, the son of Brad Lawing, a former FSU coach, and Brad was my boss at South Carolina when Will was just probably 8 or 9 years old, and Brad was the recruiting coordinator at South Carolina, and I was his graduate assistant. But just in regards to the totality of the staff between the head coach and the assistants, do you think it's been an upgrade for Boston College? And listen, I know Jeff Hafley is a great coach. Don't get me wrong. I knew some of his assistants, particularly Paul Rhodes, who was his outside linebacker coach last year. But what are your thoughts? Was it an upgrade for BC on the coaching staff as a whole?
Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned Will Lawing. Look, he was with the Patriots last year.
Yep.
And now he's going to be calling plays. Jonathan DiBiaso, the quarterback coach, his father is one of the most well-known, arguably the best coach in Massachusetts high school history. So he comes from a family of football. You mentioned Tim Lewis. He's been literally everywhere, I think.
Yes, he has.
It feels like. So, yeah, just the wealth of knowledge that this group now has. And it's funny, covering the Patriots last year, we never really got to talk to Will. And when we did, it was always sort of a scrum situation. But we never really saw him coach behind the scenes. He gets on kids very often. He is a perfectionist, admittedly. When I talked to him at BC Media Day I think last week, he said, look, I want the kids to do things and do things right the first time. And it's just been odd to kind of see, the assistants taking over. Bill O'Brien is sort of taking a back seat and he's letting the coordinators sort of do their job. That's not to say he's not coaching, because he
Right.
is. But it's been nice to see him let the coaches coach, and then he'll kind of pick and choose where he wants to pick his battles as well.
Okay. Yeah. Again, I think that goes back to probably his NFL background, where you kind of, you're more, well, I'm not going to say he's a delegator, because I've been around Bill O'Brien with his staff when he was the head coach at Penn State at a national coaching convention. We were just happened to all be in the same room, our staff and his staff, and he's a pretty intense guy. I do know that from what I recall.
The nickname Teapot is for real.
Yeah, well, listen, he grew up under George O'Leary, right? So there was very little chance he's going to be a relaxed guy. But I got a chance, and that, listen, that's been years ago now. I think he took over Penn State in 2012. So it's been about 10 years since I've been around Bill, and he wouldn't know who I was from Tom the Cat. But anyway, I do know a little bit about his personality. Of course, you mentioned Will and how hard he coaches, and that was just like his father, who was a defensive line coach, South Carolina multiple times, obviously North Carolina, Florida, and Florida State among the schools he was at. All right, so I got a couple of questions. What kind of, has this team been practicing outside for the most part this year? And what has the weather been like that they've been practicing? Because it's supposed to be a steamer on Monday in Tallahassee.
So look, I'm a New England guy, born and bred. I hate the summertime, admittedly. So anything over 70, I think, is hot. They've been outside just about every single day. The only times they weren't was when it was raining. The grass fields outside just didn't drain very well, so they'd move inside. But I'd say 90% of practice has been outside. It's been pretty hot. I mean, we've had 90-degree days and some pretty muggy ones earlier in August, but it's you can't compare it to Florida heat. So I think they're ready for it, but you can't be ready for that type of heat until you're in it.
Yeah.
But they have been outside. So one kind of weird thing that happened on Tuesday, we get one open practice per game week. Practice started outside. About 10 minutes in, Bill O'Brien was not happy and had the team go inside and had the rest of practice inside. I asked him about it after practice, just sort of, why did you do that? And he wouldn't say. So I found that very kind of strange. But if I had to guess, they've been blasting the war chant and the music and all that. I think it just wasn't loud enough outside, and he wanted, that noise. So, but otherwise, they've been outside for 90% of training camp.
Yeah, he did mention the fact about the war chant, the atmosphere in Tallahassee in his press conference. In fact, for a little bit of his press conference, I thought he was a Florida State booster. he was very positive on Florida State, which I guess you got to be. Obviously, over the last 2.5 years, we've seen very few performances like we did last week. So I'm sure that's what he's talking about as far as a great team. And obviously, everybody knows that they got a great atmosphere at Florida State, particularly at night. And I think he's probably trying to prepare his team for that, because it's a sellout crowd and they will be loud. They want to win really, really bad. Listen, I want to start with the offense, then we'll take a break and come back and talk about the defense. You had Boston College had, I think, the 13th best rushing offense in America last year. You bring Thomas Castellanos back. You've got the Robichaud kid at running back, and then you bring in Trayshawn Ward to back him up or play in the backfield a lot beside him, depending on what personnel groupings. But I heard Coach O'Brien talk about the fact that he thought that Castellanos had really developed as a passer off-season, spring practice, and obviously fall camp. He didn't have to say that. They were asked, the question was kind of, how are you going to use Tommy? Are you going to let Tommy be Tommy? And he mentioned the fact that he was an instinctive guy and they weren't going to take that away from him. But how do you – I don't think O'Brien's had a quarterback just like Castellanos before. Maybe Deshaun Watson is probably as close as he can get, and you're not going to run an NFL quarterback like you are a college quarterback. How do you see Bill O'Brien? Where do you see Castellanos in his development, and how do you think Bill O'Brien will ultimately use him in this offense this season?
So he did have Bryce Young, and that's sort of where my head goes when I think of what Tommy might be able to be. But for me and for everybody else around here, it's about his decision-making. Last year, he had 15 touchdowns and 14 picks. You can't have that again this year if they're going to be as good as people around here think they can be. So, yes, he's become a better passer, at least, especially to the sidelines and intermediate. That's kind of where he struggled last year. But people around here also forget, you know, he hadn't really played at UCF. So last year was his first real kind of taste of Division I football. So he's still learning as a quarterback. And I think you're going to see that jump this year. In terms of the offense in general, they have 5 running backs that they can deploy. Trayshawn's probably just behind or sort of neck and neck with Kai Robichaux. But you're going to see a lot of both of them. You'll see a lot of a guy named Datrell Jones, a lot of a guy named Turbo Richard, and as well as Jordan McDonald. They have, it might be their deepest room aside from wide receiver and maybe defensive line, which obviously we'll get to. But Tommy now has weapons around him. It's just a matter of him taking that next step. And with this, particular coaching situation, you can't really have a better guy if you are going to take that next step than Bill O'Brien, who's worked with the best in Tom Brady. So I'm confident that Tommy does take that next step. But this is the kind of game where BC has no-showed for the most part in the last few years. Obviously they kept it close with Florida State last year, but these big primetime marquee matchup games, it's been a real problem for BC for a while now. So for him to kind of face this right away out of the gate, I think is a big test for him. And it's a good early test for him as well.
Yeah, that's kind of about as close as he gets to home too. He's from South Georgia. We Fish and I, Charles Fishbein, our recruiting analyst, we loved him as a running back receiver coming out of high school. Of course, he wanted to play quarterback, signed with UCF, and then obviously almost beat Florida State last year with an impressive effort. And of course, I think that's what Florida State is worried about, is what exactly Castellano is going to look like this year. Because if there's if there's one kind of offense that Florida State has struggled with under Adam Fuller as its coordinator, it has been mobile quarterbacks. And of course, he led the team in rushing, and obviously, like you said, I think he had over 2,000 yards passing last year. You mentioned the running back room being very deep. I thank you for sharing that. I know, obviously, I knew about Robichaux and Ward, and I'd seen your notes on the depth chart, and I knew you were high on a couple of others. I was surprised to hear you say that you think the receiving room is as deep as it is, because you only had one returning starter, Lewis Bond, the slot, coming back, who had 52 passes for over 600 yards last year. But I know they went out and got Jerron Bradley from Texas Tech, who's had a heck of a career there, over 92 catches for over 1,200 yards in 2 seasons. But just tell us about the wide receiver room, and including those guys, and who Florida State fans need to pay attention to when they're on the field.
So you mentioned Bradley, and he's the first guy that comes to mind. BC has not had a receiver like him, maybe since the Matt Ryan days with Will Blackman, who is now kind of helping out on the staff as well. Look, Zay Flowers was a star, but he was, I'm a short guy. I'm only 5'1". He's my height, basically, in terms of, football wise. So he was a speedster, but they haven't had that go up and get it, 6'5", 6'4", whatever wide receiver. Bradley gives them that on the outside. You mentioned Lewis Bond. That connection with Tommy is still there, and he might be his favorite receiver. A few other guys, though. Jaden Skeet, who's been here but just didn't get much playing time, sort of came on strong at the end of last year. He's a local guy from Catholic Memorial High School here. He's poised for a big season. And then there's a redshirt freshman, Reed Harris, who has just sort of exploded on the scene in minicamp and training camp. Another big body, fast kid, can catch really well. And then you just have, depth pieces. You have a Jaden McGowan who just came in as well. There's a guy who reminds me a ton of Wes Welker when you watch him, named Luke McLaughlin. He could be a factor. There's just, again, they had Zay, but it was Zay and then everybody else. Now it's everyone sort of slots into a role, and no one has to be that true number one. And then we also have Kamari Morales at tight end as well, who they brought in from North Carolina, who played with Drake May last year. So there is now, again, there is a set of weapons around Tommy and for this BC offense that they have not had in quite some time. It's just a matter of putting it all together now.
Yeah, and for you, for our listeners and viewers that don't know, Kamari Morales is a Tallahassee, Florida High. Tallahassee Lincoln High product, and he had a great season 2 years ago at North Carolina. His best season was 29 catches for 358 yards. And if I'm not mistaken, Morales is the all-time leader in touchdown passes at North Carolina for tight ends. So, and you bring back also Jeremiah Franklin, who was a starter last year. Now, how do you see? I ask you that question. Let's go through the offensive line because you have a massive, massive offensive line. Obviously 13th in the nation last year in rushing offense. You got Ozzie Trapillo, Drew Kendall, Logan Tyler are all back. They've started a ton of games. And then, of course, I believe Jude Bowery is probably going to start at the other tackle opposite Trapillo. Am I saying Trapillo's name right? Trapillo. All right. And then, of course, Jack Conley, who's got 19 career starts, is a candidate to start at guard. Just tell us a little bit about the offensive line and what your expectations are. Do you think they've made a step up in their development from year to year, and how the new additions looking?
So if they were healthy, I'd be a lot more confident.
Okay.
Logan probably isn't going to play, which is a massive loss for them. He had off-season surgery, has not practiced yet.
Okay.
Jude Bowery had been fine, and he was looking, very good in camp. He's been out the last few days. So that is now a question heading into Monday. Again, we only had one open practice. So for all I know, he could have practiced today and tomorrow and be good to go. But those are two huge holes if they are missing. They do still have Ozzie. They have Drew Kendall at center. You mentioned Jack Conley. You'll see Dwayne Alec as well as Kevin Klein probably filling in. But I'm worried. I'm worried about the offensive line. You lost Christian Mahogany in the draft. He was a huge piece of the puzzle last year. And then Kyle Hergel, who was sort of underrated, a transfer that came in from Texas State. And he was a big piece. He sort of brought that meanness to the offensive line room that wasn't there the last couple years. So I do think even if Bowery and Taylor are out running the ball especially against Florida State, they should be okay. It's the pass protection I'm worried about. This BC defensive line made life very difficult for the O-line throughout training camp. Now, part of me thinks that the BC D line is just very good and sort of just made life hard because they're so good. But that offensive line, Tommy might be running quite a bit on Monday night just because of, some of the injuries. But overall, it's still a good unit. But not having Logan Taylor specifically, that's a big blow for them.
Okay. All right. So let's just talk a little about how you think Bill O'Brien will attack this Florida State offense. He's got Castellanos. He's got a game on tape to game plan against Florida State after he saw what he saw against Georgia Tech. And obviously there's a connection there. When Bill O'Brien started his coaching career, Brent Key was a player at Georgia Tech. And I'm sure not only has he's seen the film multiple times this week in trying to prepare his team for Florida State, but I'm sure he's picked Brent's brain as well. Do you expect them to listen? Motion and eye candy is a big part of what they do in the NFL. It's a big part of what Georgia Tech did for Florida State last week. Had people running all over the place. How do you think Bill O'Brien will attack this Florida State defense based off what he saw on tape last week?
Exactly the same way if they're smart. I'd like to see Tommy run the ball 25 times, ideally, and I'd like to see the running backs get just as many touches. Look, you're going to have to throw the ball. Obviously, it's college football, but run the ball, especially with that crowd and that environment. If BC can kind of control the clock and I guess sort of it's hard to quiet that crowd, I know, but to at least sort of stem the tide a little bit, especially early on. I'd be shocked if they came out, throwing the ball. You will see a lot of motion. Lewis Bond, Jaden McGowan, those guys can move around a little bit. But, yeah, no, I'd be stunned if they came out looking to throw the ball more than run it. The blueprint is there. Again, we saw Georgia Tech last week, and arguably, you can make the case that Tommy is better at kind of doing what they want to do. So, I'd be stunned if it's not a run-heavy game plan.
All right. Hey, do you have time for us to take a break and come right back and talk about the defense and get some final thoughts from you on what the game may look like on Saturday?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back with Kevin Stone in about 70 seconds.
The Backshore. That stretch of fluffy sand just beyond the reach of the salty waves. The place reserved for volleyball nets, cookouts, and the air filled with fun and laughter. Celebrate the Backshore with Backshore Apparel. Grab an amazingly soft and comfy Backshore Apparel beach hoodie to keep you protected from the sun's harmful rays. Or the Backshore revamped trucker hat, a modern twist on a classic favorite. Crafted from moisture-wicking fabrics, ensuring they're lightweight and breathable. Not to mention durable with their unique floating feature. Shop now at BackshoreApparel.com. And right now, FSU fans get 10% off your order with code FSU10. Hey Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
Welcome back to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines, and our guest today is Kevin Stone from the Rivals Network, EagleAction.com, that covers Boston College, and he's been gracious enough between covering the Patriots and Boston College to drop in and, for lack of a better term, drop a little knowledge on us about the Eagles under first-year head coach Bill O'Brien, and probably Kevin, the weak link in this team's last year, their success. They did go to a bowl game, so can't say they weren't successful, but they had a defense that was not really great last year. I think they were 70th in total defense, particularly bad on the rushing front. I think they've changed their style a little bit. I think they're more even-based this year under Tim Lewis, but I know you're a big fan of the defensive front, which returns 4 starters, but just talk a little bit about, and I know you can't get in specific scheme-wise, but just a little bit of the philosophy, possibly in general, going from Jeff Hafley to Tim Lewis as your coordinator.
So you know Tim Lewis very well. He's going to rush. Pressure is sort of his name of the game, and it's something BC has lacked over the last, call it 4 or 5 years under Hafley. For whatever reason, they always seem sort of held back, for lack of a better term. That's not going to be the case this year. That front four with Neto Akpala, Donovan Ezeraku, George Rooks, and Cam Horsley to start things off. They're my favorite unit on the team right now. Now, having said that, they won't get a single pressure on Monday night, and I'll look like an idiot. But I am very
after last week, we know what that feels like.
I'm very, very confident in that unit, just because they now have the freedom, I think, to really pin their ears back and sort of get after it a little bit. The one thing I am worried about is the linebacking core. There's some talent there, but it's just not very deep. You know, you have Cam Arnold, who is a specimen and looks the part, but fans are still sort of waiting for him to take that next step into that elite category in the ACC. And then after that, there's some unknowns. There's Davion Crouch, who has sort of taken over one of the roles during camp. Sort of no one really knew much about him. Very athletic, can make plays all over the field, but again, just sort of unknown right now until we see him in a game. Another guy, Owen McGowan, another Catholic Memorial kid here. He's been in the system for, I think this is his 3rd year now, sort of needs to take that next step. And then a guy named Sione Hawa, who just is a game wrecker, I think. But after that, it gets a little dicey. So interesting to see what they do. But and then just real quick, the secondary as well. Amari Jackson's their number one, sort of their lockdown guy. But then after that, again, some unproven guys. Bryquise Brown, Max Tucker, and then at safety, KP Price, Jalen Cheek. There's some names there that fans should be confident in around here, but until they see it in a game, it's tough to really know what they have.
Yeah, in my research at linebacker, I did want to ask you about this guy because he's projected to be I don't think Bill O'Brien released a depth chart. If it was released, it was not released before
last night.
Okay, so yeah, I have not seen it.
Yep.
There was a kid named Bryce Steele that was mentioned in a couple of the preseason magazines. Missed last year to an injury, but has 78 career tackles and 23 career gains before in 2 seasons. Are you expecting much out of him?
So yes and no. He actually had cancer last year,
Okay.
and came and he's been practicing, but it's one of those things where it's just felt like they're sort of easing him in, which is obviously understandable. He is, I believe, he was third. I don't have the depth chart in front of me. I probably should, but he's on there. I just wouldn't expect much of him, at least Monday night. Down the road, I think this season you'll probably see some more of him, but in terms of Monday night, he'll be out there, but I wouldn't expect much of an impact from him. When he is out there, he's a fantastic player. Sideline to sideline, can get downhill as well. But coming back from that, they're being very, very cautious with him, I think.
Well, that's just great news that he's back playing football, coming back from something like that. So obviously continued health and improvement to Bryce, because those stories are rare. You were talking about the secondary. Obviously, Amari Jackson started for you guys last year. Jalen Cheek, at the very least, was a part-time starter. Statistically, the secondary was really good. 26th in pass defense last year. Of course, some of that's probably reflective of what was going on with the run. People having so much success. But you brought in Cameron Martinez from Ohio State, Ryan Turner from Ohio State. I know you mentioned KP Price. It sounds like in your scouting report, your depth chart projection, it looks like they could be deep in the secondary. What do those new pieces look like? I know it looked like maybe Kari Johnson and Cameron Martinez, based on the research I did, we're going to kind of be the starting 2 nickels, and Turner might battle with Max Tucker for the other corner job. Both the 2 Ohio State guys were were ranked 1st and 3rd as far as portal ranking for Boston College. They were the I see Martinez was ranked as the 3rd highest portal guy they got, and Turner was ranked as the 1st highest. What have they brought to this defense? And they didn't play a lot of Ohio State, but do you think they're going to work their way into the rotation this year?
Yeah, it's one of those groups where, like the running backs, I think you'll see all of them. Cam Martinez was having a fantastic start to camp, was injured the last week or so. Again, he could have been back to practice this week, and we just haven't seen it. But if he's out there, he's one of their top 2 or 3 guys. Again, he was having a great camp, but you'll see all of those bodies. Tucker, you'll see. Cheek, you'll see. Price, you'll see. Victor Nelson at safety will be another guy as well. Turner's going to be a factor for them. I think he's more of their slot guy. But overall, again, it's a deep room. It's just a matter of sort of who they like where, and you don't really know until you start getting into game situations. But it's a room where you'll see and hear a lot of different names.
Okay. All right. So obviously, Tim Lewis and Bill O'Brien have both seen what Florida State looked like on defense against Georgia Tech last week. It was not one of their better performances, either schematically or really effort-wise. How do you think, Tim? And listen, I don't think anybody knows on our side what. Obviously, we can't talk. And I was not at practice today. One of the few days I've not been at practice. We don't know and we could not talk about what we saw from them on the scout team anyway. So I can honestly say I don't know what we're going to see on offense this week from Florida State. I think it will be at least a little bit less conservative than what we saw last week. But how do you think Tim Lewis and Bill O'Brien are going to attack what looks to be a offense that at least last week, what they put on tape was a team that struggled to run the ball, struggled to push the ball downfield until late in the game when they had to. What do you see Boston College doing to Florida State? Are they going to crowd the box, bring pressure? What do you think?
Well, first of all, sorry for my house phone going off. I thought we
couldn't even hear it.
I thought we'd go through the whole show. I do think you're going to try and see them stack the box early, but again, not really knowing what Florida State is even going to do, it's tough. So I'd like to say there's going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of blitzing, but I almost feel like they have to sit back and sort of wait to see Florida State's approach. So Again, I keep going back to Tim Lewis, just sort of his overall makeup as a defensive coordinator. His whole career has been about pressure. It's been about exotic looks. It's been about different schemes. So in my head, it's going to be a lot of, guys sort of coming at them and making Florida State make quick decisions. But again, now having said that, watch Florida State just run the ball 40 times. So
that's what I think he wants to do.
So, well, let me ask you, what should BC be worried about the most?
Oh, I mean, listen, if their offensive line plays like it's capable of playing and what we think they're going to be like, and the running back room that Florida State has, which we thought was, and listen, there were some weird running back rotation, weird snap counts for Florida State last week that still baffle me to death. But I think that Mike wants to run the ball. If they can run the ball, that's what he's going to do. I think that he's got to open it up a little bit more than against Georgia Tech. I think he's got to get rid of the safeties spinning down and create an extra hat. There were a lot of times last week that Florida State had one less hat to block than the defense did. They struggled to adjust to that during the game. So I think they're going to run the ball, but I do think they're going to have to let DJU and what is a developing wide receiver core. I think they're going to have to take some chances, try to get those kids involved in the game early, try to push the ball downfield early. They did not do that against Georgia Tech. I think DJU started the game 12 of 14, but averaged minus yards passing down as far as attempt downfield. Where was the ball when the ball was touched? It was less than a yard. It was minus behind the line of scrimmage. So I think I think the adjustment you make is early in the games, you're going to throw it. You try to push the ball downfield. And then that opens up the running game in Florida State. If it comes out and plays hard and plays tough, I do think they will run the ball. They do have Roydell Williams ran for 500 yards at Alabama last year as a second-team back. Jalen Lucas has played at Indiana last year. He was one of the more dynamic players in practice last year. I think you'll see the ball. Mike try to get him the ball more. He actually said in his press conference yesterday that they should have gotten Jalen the ball more. And, of course, he's a kid that can work as a wide receiver or running back. So I do think you'll see Mike being more aggressive as they go against Boston College because obviously being conservative last week and waiting until the last drive of the game to get aggressive in the vertical passing game did not work to their advantage. So I think you'll see a little bit of a change up for Mike. And I think, listen, this is an important game for them. Going 0-2 to start the season and 0-2 in the league, that's going to be hard to come back from. So I think you will see a more aggressive game plan for Mike. And I think, obviously, off the backlash they got from this game, I think you'll see a better effort from the team on both sides of the ball. But obviously, we'll see what happens on Monday night. And that's what I want to ask you about. Listen, BC played a really good FSU team last year very closely, obviously at home, not in Tallahassee. And then you've got Bill O'Brien, who has took the Texans to 4 playoff berths in 7 seasons as the Texans head coach. Did a great job at Penn State in his first tenure as a college head coach under really dire circumstances where they virtually gutted the roster and people had transferred out after the whole Joe Paterno deal. So you take that close. You get a lot of people back from last year that played in that game up in Chestnut Hill. You got Bill O'Brien there. You've got a BC team that saw Georgia Tech dominate Florida State physically. What do you think Boston College's mindset is coming into this game on Monday night?
They're confident, as they should be, but I think the fan base is more nervous than the team is, just because, again, I go back to one of the first things we talked about. The expectations are always so high, especially in these types of games. BC they've no-showed for so many years now in these big spots that I hope this isn't another letdown. In terms of the team mentality, they're confident. Again, Bill O'Brien has simply stated, and he's repeated this to the team over and over again, why can't we win at Boston College? Boston College is often viewed as it's Northeast. You can't really, it's a pro town. And don't get me wrong, they won't get nearly the attention that the Patriots or the Red Sox, the Celtics, and Bruins get. But back in 2007, in 2008 when they were number 2 in the country, people were talking about them. People were calling into sports radio and talking BC. So they're confident. They feel like it's sort of now or never in terms of bringing the program back up. And, what better way to do it than in front of the entire country against Florida State? The thing I want to ask you real quick, are Florida State fans sort of overly confident, or is this now a spot where it's, I should say, is there a lack of respect for BC? Because I'd understand if there is.
Well, listen, I've gotten several text messages. I've seen board posts where Florida State's going to blow Boston College out. I mean, I think people spend too much time on brands, right? The biggest brand's always going to win. If you go look at, and listen, I think the transfer portal has changed everybody's ability to get better so much quicker. And some years you're going to hit in the portals. So I don't think most people that are breaking down games do portal research. Like, it's the first thing I do. I go look and see who a team's brought in the portal, because most of the time those guys are going to be injected right into the 2 deep, if not the starting lineup. And listen, I think that most people are going to assume that Florida State is going to win easily. I've been told that by a couple of people. Listen, I think that people that say that, I don't see how you say that after what Florida State put on tape last week. You're only as good as your last game. This is not the team that Florida State played. Now I would have even me, as much research as I've done, and Vegas guys are pretty smart, right? There's a reason they can leave those bright lights on all night. They got to pay those bills.
Yeah.
And they've got it as a 16.5 point. I've seen it as low as 15.5, as high as 17.5. I certainly think it's within the margin of the spread based off my research. Now, you've got me feeling a little bit better after your breakdown of BC's offensive line.
Yeah.
If Florida State's defensive line, which has 4 starters, 3 starters really, that we know could have been good in the past. If they play up to their ability, that makes me feel a little bit better about Florida State's chances. But yes, I do. Listen. I ran into a guy at the gym today, and he was talking to me about, hey, I read some of your thoughts, and he goes, I kind of agree with you. So there is a segment of the fan base that is nervous because of what they saw last week. It looked like it was even though it was a close game, they were dominated and really outcoached. So I think you've got some issues there, and you don't know who's going to show up because everybody just assumed that Florida State was going to roll on after losing 10 players to NFL, and they didn't replace those 10 guys with 10 NFL guys. So it's not the same. But I think Florida State fans surely expect to win this game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, I think they'll take a win in any way it comes after last week. But so I'll ask you, what kind of game do you expect? Do you think BC can compete for 4 quarters? You think this is a closer game than what the so-called experts in Las Vegas are telling it's going to be? Or do you think this is going to play out? We've seen years where, listen, Boston College, like last year, do you think this is going to play out like last year? Or is this going to be one of those games where, like you said, BC kind of lays an egg? Or do you think Bill O'Brien helps them get over that hump?
So I can't see BC laying an egg. It feels too different now. And I think they are a different program under O'Brien. I think it's a close game. I was talking to someone last night. I'm thinking like 2017, 24-21. I think both these defenses are very good. And ultimately, defenses is sort of ahead of offense at this time of year. So I'm expecting turnovers on both sides. Again, both quarterbacks need to prove themselves still. And I do think you see them make a few mistakes. But it's probably wishful thinking on my part, but I do think BC might be able to pull this out. I'm not going to come out and outright predict it just so I can avoid any backlash. But I do think if it feels like a now or never type game for BC in terms of that marquee, bright lights, everybody watching. Can this program arrive again? And that's this sort of, it's a huge, huge spot for them. It is for Florida State too, but you guys are used to these marquee, prime time, all eyes on you type of games. BC is not. So I think it's going to be close. It could go either way, but I'd be shocked if it's a a 17 or more point game.
Yeah, are you coming down for the game?
I wish. I got to do high school football and
Okay.
then NFL stuff starting. So the flights are too expensive too.
Yeah, well, it's certainly not getting cheaper to travel these days. Well,
Yeah.
listen, if you're going to replay this on your site, it is going to be hot on Monday night for Boston College fans. They're right now calling for about a 60% chance of thunderstorms on Monday night. We do get a lot of rain, thunderstorms in and out real quick. So for anybody that's listening from your site, you might want to prepare for both very, very hot weather and some rains, and hopefully the thunderstorms will not delay the game any. But listen, Kevin, man, appreciate you coming on. We love, we used to call these things know your enemy. We just kind of just call them Seminole Sidelines anymore. But appreciative of you taking a time out of your very hectic schedule to join us, and hope we have you back sometime. If anything ever we can do down here to help you out, please let us know. Listen, good luck this year. And we'll be back in touch soon. Listen, I want to thank all our viewers and listeners for listening to us. I hope you got some insight on Boston College that we know you got some insight on Boston College that you would not have otherwise. And if you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com today and check our practice report out. Kurt, Jerry, Bob, and I believe Nick were at practice, and they've got notes from today's practice. And obviously we've got articles throughout the week, including what we thought about Mike Norvell's interview yesterday. I've got my Takeaway Tuesday column, which is my takeaways from last week's game, looking forward to this week's game. So plenty of content at theosceola.com. And while you're here, subscribe to the Osceola YouTube channel by hitting the subscribe button and notification button to let you know when we are doing live or tape shows. We will be back possibly Sunday. We'll make that announcement. We may come back with a mixed crowd of people and talk a little first week of the college football season heading into because you got Florida, Miami on and a bunch of marquee games on Saturday. So we may talk a little bit about that and then offer our final thoughts on Florida State, Boston College. But thanks for joining us on Seminole Sidelines, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.